Good afternoon. This is the Norwalk Affordable Housing Plan Committee meeting of Monday, August 19th. That's a special meeting going through some of the recommendations and project status with the consultant team and the committee. And I'll turn it over to Ashley to walk us through.
Sure. So where we left off last month's meeting was going through the draft Affordable Housing Action Plan summary, the matrix. There were some updates made to that draft, and it was circulated to the committee members following the meeting by Michelle. I did get a couple comments over email. We also had a meeting that week with the joint ad hoc committee with the Common Council. Got some additional comments there. And at this point, I'd just like to go through this committee and see if there's any additional comments that we should be picking up, and I can share my screen. This matrix will be worked into the draft, and just for the rest of the context, we have started sending over draft chapters of the Affordable Housing Action Plan itself to staff. We expect to send the rest of the draft chapters this week. We also have the finalized housing needs assessment. You had a presentation on that about 2 months ago. There were some edits that were picked up in that document based on that meeting, and that's also been sent over to staff. So a lot of the work is being finalized. So this is the community value statement that we updated based on comments from the last meeting. Any further comments to this community value statement? This would appear in the beginning of the document as well as in the end where we're wrapping up the action. So it's Norwalk strives to be a city with housing accessible to all, a place where residents can live and work because of the affordable, diverse housing stock that accommodates the diversity of its population.
Are you asking for comments just on this first page, or are you talking about the whole document?
Let's just go with the first page.
I'm just from a practical standpoint, 83% of the Connecticut median income is a very odd number. You know, we often talk about 80%, just because that's a commonly used term for both in our own regulations as well as in low-income housing tax credit regulations and the like. So I understand that that's sort of like a target number, but I just feel like 80% would just make more sense from a practical rule setting standpoint.
Well, within the plan too, you do talk about 85% AMI, and so I think whatever we do, should be consistent.
The 83 and the 85% came out of the analysis in the HNA that found that the 80 wasn't enough. But I see your point that it ties back. The 80% is the more common number.
I mean, if I think for this first page, it probably doesn't matter as much, but certainly in the matrix.
Okay.
When we're talking about actions.
Yep.
Yeah, maybe there's two items there, or it's broken out a little differently where you could talk about the 80, but then also what the 83 relates to, because that might shift a recommendation or a policy change for the workforce housing regs as well.
Adam, if I remember correctly, I remember last time you saying number 7, maybe not calling attention to the 2-bedroom might be problematic. Do you still feel that way, or?
The point I was trying to make was that we desperately need family housing. Private developers are likely to build 1- and 2-bedroom units. They almost never build 3 and plus. And we need a place for our families to stay. But since you've added to the sentence, because before it really focused on the 2 bedrooms, now it says family size units. I think that sort of covers it.
Cool.
I don't think it would even hurt to change that 2-bedroom to 3-bedroom.
The 2-bedroom was coming up as a need for seniors.
Okay. Then in that case, we can definitely leave it because that is a need as well.
Yeah, it was
Why
identified.
why 2-bedroom for seniors and not 1-bedroom? We're trying to do, most of our developments are all 1-bedrooms that are the senior developments. We are trying to do something like 10% 2-bedrooms, as we do have sometimes a need for a medical, like a live-in aid or something, but
That was it. It was the live-in aid or the adult, child coming back to help assist their parent.
But also you sometimes have a situation where a husband and wife may still be, both alive in their senior years, but one may have a medical condition that prohibits the other from sleeping in the same room with them.
Yeah. I mean,
So in that statement, so when we say family size units, is that referring to the 3-bedroom?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Without putting 3-bedroom in there, we just go by the term family size units.
I think it's 3+, right?
Right. That would be like 3-bedroom, 4-bedroom.
Should we put 3+ in brackets?
Yeah, I think so.
Couldn't hurt.
Okay. Any further comments on this page?
I think the second point needs to be wordsmithed a little bit. I think just saying there are some renters and homeowners at all income levels, but I think saying there are some at all income levels, I think that it sounds a little, I think we can get rid of the word some.
Okay. We had started that way, but then we weren't sure if that sounded too aggressive. But there are renters and homeowners at all income levels that are financially burdened.
I don't think that sounds too aggressive. I think that's good. It's like portion, right? A portion of all there's a certain portion of all renters and homeowners at all income levels.
Yeah. Although
perfect.
obviously at the lower income levels, it's a higher proportion than at the upper income levels. But that comes out in data. Okay. Any further comments on this page? The next. Okay. So a lot of the conversation last time was focused on this second action item. Consider, and so it was amended following that discussion, consider amending section 6.12 workforce housing regulations to increase the percentage of units in new developments required to be designated as workforce housing from 10% to 15 to 20%. The additional requirement could be based on a sliding scale, for example, requiring 50% of beds to be affordable for 80% SMI or 10% of units to be affordable for 60% AMI. This requirement should be monitored to ensure that the increase is not inadvertently adversely affecting housing production in the city. So the goal here was to capture the concern about making sure we were being consistent with the state regs, but also potentially grab some additional units by having it be a sliding scale. And then the other concern is that if you have a percentage that's too high, that could discourage development. So we don't want that to happen because we do need more of these units being produced. So making sure that it's being monitored and adjusted based on the market.
I guess I'm confused by the examples because you've got 15 or 10, but we were saying moving up from 10. So
I think on the last call, there were some concerns about going up to 20 as being too high.
Well, I think there's two different issues here. One is the 15 to 20%, but then talking about 10%. But one of the issues was that there should be a sliding scale to encourage developers to, instead of targeting 80%, which they're all building right now, some percentage of 80% AMI, to encourage some to do target a lower area median income, and that there should be a incentive to do so. So it would be a reduction in the overall number of units that would have to be set aside. I think that was the discussion that we had. But I do think that when we say 15 to 20% and then saying there could be a 10%, it seems like then we're really saying 10 to 20%, or I think the 15 to 20 happened because we said, oh, we should go up from 10% to 15. And then someone else is like, well, why not even go even higher? And so then we had this, I think we need to sort of settle on a number and then figure out
Okay.
the paradigm after that.
So it could be like 20% at 80, 15% at 60, 10% at 40, or I mean, in this
Sure.
matrix, we don't have to settle on the exact numbers because eventually it would be worked into a law that would be evaluated at that point in time. So just giving the range and giving the idea or the concept is the goal for this matrix. Just adding the range of 15 to 20.
The only,
I liked what you said. That was an interesting idea. 20% at 80 and reduced from there.
Okay.
the only issue that I have with, and I understand what you're going for, but the only issue I have is that on the implementation side later, we don't, without understanding what the impacts are to the project, I think it's a little, just to say, all right, we need to increase it to 15 to 20%. What does that mean for the project and what's that actually based off of?
The other potential approach is to do it as a bonus. So if you provided X number of units at that higher, let's say at 85% AMI, then you could have a density bonus. Not to totally change the topic.
No,
Yeah,
but that all could be tied together. Sure.
Yeah.
Other incentives to go to either a greater number or a lower percentage of AMI.
Yeah, then maybe what it should say is workforce housing from 10% to 10% to 20%. Because if you're gonna have a 10%, like if you did, let's say you did 50% AMI, you only need 10% of your units. Like we still have to have that in the bracket. Otherwise, people are gonna think they have to do another 5 at, a different level.
Right.
Yeah, I prefer to keep everything at SMI and not base anything off AMI.
Okay. Oh, yep, I can change that.
Why is that, Steve? Is that just from a consistency standpoint?
Well, I mean, and plus the SMI is a lower value than the AMI.
Ah, okay,
the-
great.
The
Yeah.
AMI is so out of whack with the world as to begin with that the SMI is almost out of whack, but the AMI is way out of whack.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, because
That
you're
makes a lot of
picking
sense.
up like Greenwich and New Canaan.
Oh, then yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Because sometimes that 60% AMI number is higher than the 80 SMI. It's just crazy.
Yeah,
Amazing.
yeah.
Sorry, I have a question. Does the income requirements go by the SMI? Which I
Yes.
think it should go by, which I would hope that it would change to go for the area median income because this is more expensive. Because the cap that they're giving us is once you go over, you're done.
Okay, so you're saying, we require the units based on SMI, but do the actual people, is that based on AMI?
The income, right? Your
Right.
income cap.
I
Yeah,
don't believe so.
Yeah, I don't
But
think you can do
Steve-
it that, because that's essentially what you're saying is that people under, like whether it's the SMI or the AMI, this is how much money somebody can make to be in that sized unit. That's how much the household can make. So I think what we were saying is that our area median income is so high that and I'm making up the number because I don't really remember it, but if it's like 85,000 for for 80%, it's like 70,000 on the state median income, and that we were trying to build more housing for lower income households.
Yeah, I think, Nicole, what you're talking about too, I think, I can't remember if it's a separate recommendation within here, but you're talking about you come in under the workforce housing program and your income goes up, which is a good thing, but but it kicks you out of the workforce housing program.
Right.
So the only kind of sort of tricky thing, Norwalk's at over 13% off that benchmark. The question is, are we okay with that percent dropping down if we put something in there to deal with the situation where somebody's income kicks up, where we might not technically, that unit may no longer technically qualify under the state's definition, but it would still work in our system. So we would allow you to keep making more money, but then you're still paying the former rent. That's a kind of policy question we'd have to answer.
Okay, okay.
It sounds worth adding, or at least having in here as something to look in further, because I think people fall into that
Well, Adam,
more often than not.
can you do
Not more
that?
often.
Whether the state allows it, or I'm sorry, the city allows it or not? Or is that because it really depends on, are you doing it or were these units funded that way? Right? If the units are funded through the state or federal government, you may not be able to allow, but I actually don't know how every program works.
Yeah, I was actually just texting my development person and asking them if we can use SMI or if we have to use AMI for most of our things. So I've not gotten an answer yet, but it's something that we need to look at, because that could be very confusing if the state or feds require us to use AMI, but the SMI is different, and then we'll have to sort of, mix and match. You know what I mean? That could be complicated. I'm looking into that now.
Yeah, the area we're just talking about is under the workforce housing, and that's all SMI. That's what we use for that. So there might be multiple, like to your point, Michelle, like if it's a state program or a federal program, they may use AMI, but the workforce, what we base all ours off of is SMI. So I think if we like under the scenario we were talking about, somebody gets a big raise, which is a great thing. They're making more money now, but now they're kicked out of the workforce program. So they may actually have less take home per month because they have to pay market rents versus the reduced rent. The question for the city is there a way where will allow somebody up to a certain increase over their current salary to remain in a workforce unit? It may not technically count with the state anymore, so it could drop us down a fraction of a percent, but is that something we think is a good thing or a bad thing? We have to talk about that.
That's a comment we heard at the meeting with the Common Council as well, as that being a need.
But it seems like we had that as like an action in here, some sort of like investigation or whatever the right thing is. We may not have the answer right now, but
Yeah, I believe it's captured. I'll double check. Okay. All right. I think we resolved this one. The second one was also another conversation. Yeah, so this is basically what we were just saying. It's just above the threshold to be eligible. Oh, it's similar. That was more talking about aging out of it or incoming out of it.
What was the reasoning for increasing from 80 to 85?
We were finding that there were a lot of people that were just outside of the 80%, so they weren't sort of just the same example of if somebody was in the program and got a raise and no longer qualified, if they switched over to market rate housing, they would be making less money.
Okay.
So I think we can tie that comment into this one as well.
I just feel the need to point out that we have neighborhoods, entire neighborhoods where the market rate is 80% or so of the AMI and I understand that's different than SMI, but I don't understand why we would need to go up to 85, because I feel like at 85%, yeah, they're priced out of the workforce housing, but at that point, can't they find a place in the market? That's what I would think.
Yeah, I think that's the key thing is the 85 SMI versus the 85 AMI is probably a big difference.
Yeah, no, it probably is.
I apologize for going off topic, but Sonia's here, so it's a good person to ask this question to. When you were talking about, Ashley had mentioned density bonuses. And the only way I'm thinking about it, like in South Norwalk, to achieve a density bonus would also probably need to give them a height bump too. And I know South Norwalk has kind of said that current height where some of the buildings, the newer buildings are built to is a lot of times in some of those neighborhoods is the highest that, the present appetite is for. So I'm just trying to think about how we could do incentives for height and density if the neighborhood doesn't want it. So it's kind of like we have one need of the affordable housing where we want to try to get more of it, but then we're kind of constrained by what we could do for going vertical.
I can tell you that nothing has changed with that. The people still do not want to see any more of these big high-rise buildings. I mean, they don't want to see them. That has not changed at all.
Well, and I think too, we should recognize that just because, South Norwalk has a larger concentration of lower income households, it doesn't mean that it's then responsible for creation of all of the affordable housing units. And
Exactly. I mean,
yeah, and that other communities can
But in
explore
one
the same
community.
opportunities that are being suggested to, it seems, South Norwalk exclusively.
Exactly. How much can you overpopulate for one area? I mean, getting around down here has gotten absolutely insane. Even when
Yeah,
you're
and
out.
I would think, I would think this would apply, whatever bonuses would apply across whatever the zone was or whatever the area was. So it wouldn't be exclusive to South Norwalk, but I know just thinking of past conversations that about the height, they were kind of, that seemed to be the appetite was where we were at. They didn't want to see it increased anymore.
Exactly. And that has not changed.
And we're at 4.5 stories, correct?
6.5.
Oh.
Not to return to the other conversation, but I did confirm that all of our contracts with the state for low-income housing tax credits, which is how most sort of, 60, 80, 40% housing is built. All of those are in AMI, both for the state and the federal government. So there would be some complicated math there to see what you're hitting, because you wouldn't be sort of be like our 60% would be maybe your 80 or 70, and it would just make it a little more complicated for us, but
Could we do an
not impossible to work
exclusion?
on.
Yeah, could we do an exclusion for state and federally funded affordable housing development? Like require, unless it conflicts with the requirements of state and federally funded affordable housing development?
what we've done in the past, even like with Soundview Landing, is they did whatever the requirements were for the grant funding, but they also gave us the workforce as well.
I mean, usually we're more than meeting, any of the requirements set by the city because we're doing 30% and 40% and 50% as well as the 1680. So in the end, it probably doesn't matter. It's just not sort of clean for anyone doing
Yeah.
like the Wall Street Place project or our projects.
So we had been tying this to the way it's written in the current zoning. Steve, maybe we talk after this.
Yeah, I think there might be two different things we're talking
Yeah.
about, but that's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, if we're talking about like, let's say affordable housing versus workforce development, I even wonder, should we break them out? As, different, sections, just so that there isn't confusion between the two, or if, actually, I'm not even sure what in here hits really affordable only.
Yeah, this section's really more tied to the workforce housing.
Okay.
We'll take a look at that question specifically and see if there's a way to bring clarity to the concern. All right, so I don't think there were a lot of questions on the next one last time, so I'll just move on. We had, so we'll go back and look at this one again. Streamlining the approvals process for developments.
Is that
This
sort of
was-
what Chuck was talking about in his email?
Yes, yes. So the idea here is that if you give certainty to the development, in terms of exactly what's being required, in terms of percentages and what the process is going to be, it can make the planning for building new housing more predictable, which then can help facilitate development.
Steve, how much do you buy that versus it being like, because it's a double-edged sword when it comes to this, or it can be. Like, do you think it actually will spur the development, or is it more just like a fast track and things get out of control?
I don't know if it actually would spur new projects. It's a tough case because I think you ask any developer and they're going to say the process is too long.
Of
unless it's
course.
completely as of right. I was at a meeting Friday with the New York City Metro planning folks, and it was Upper New Jersey, New York, and Southwest Connecticut. And some of the timeframes they were talking about for projects were 2 to 3 months longer than what we would do here, and I thought, and they thought they were streamlined, and I was like, boy, I would get screamed at for some of that stuff. But I think there's always a little extra time built into our process that could be cut out. So I think it's definitely something to look at that we talk about a lot in-house, just to try to be as, streamlined and business friendly as we can during these processes.
Yeah, because there's a difference between streamlining and as of right, right?
Oh, big
Like,
difference, yeah.
And I think
Yes.
his comments were move more into the as of right camp, and that's what would increase or spur development, because there's more certainty your project's gonna occur than doing either a site plan or special permit where you have public hearings, and we all know how those can go. That's
we
the
did do
angle,
that.
right?
With the new regs though, and I forgot the exact cutoff, but we did put in minimum thresholds for what goes to the commission and what doesn't. So the idea being smaller projects don't have to.
Oh, that's right.
We did bump that up to, like, I would call it more small to mid-size, and you get larger projects have to go to at least one level.
I forgot about that.
So I just wanted to point out that the actual goal that all of these fall under talks about affordability of households 41% to 85, and we really haven't done anything below 60. So I think we maybe need to think about, do we need to change that 41%, or do we have to build some things out to address that 41 to 59 range, right, which we haven't quite touched.
I
You're
think
talk- You're talking 40 to 59% of the income levels?
Yeah, so the actual goal, right, that all of these action steps are under, like the sentence in particular, the zoning update should target the expanding supply of rental housing of all types that is affordable to households making between 41% SMI and 85% SMI, and I think it's as well, facilitating a greater proportion of 2-bedroom and family size units, but we don't say anything in here about 41%.
I mean, if that's
Creating
an
any-
area that we
creating-
definitely want to target, then I think we should say that, because when I was looking at the first slide and the income level was at looking for housing 75,000 and less, my first thought was, we should lower that target. But then the fact that the word less was there, I thought, okay, well, maybe it's covered. So if we want to bring more clarity to it, then yeah, we should definitely put that wording in there. Because you have so many families that are not even making anywhere near 75,000.
Right.
And I'll add that for most of the housing authority properties, you can get in under 50% of AMI, but who we actually serve is well under 30% of AMI. So we're not really serving again, we may be mixing AMI and SMI up here, but we're not really serving those who are earning between 40% and 75, 40% and 80%, as they're talking about here. We're trying to with some of our newer developments, but I would agree with Michelle. There's not much you're talking about how we encourage or incentivize that really low income targeting.
Yeah,
And
and
that-
nobody's gonna do it if we don't, because they don't get as much cash flow off of that, right? So if we want it, we're gonna have to like actually set some expectation there around that, because nobody's gonna voluntarily do it unless they're specifically doing I don't know even deeply, I think it's below. I don't actually know what the term there is, but at that 40 to 60 particular range.
I agree.
Okay, so we'll come up with some more strategies for this section here, taking a look what we think we can work on. Okay. I don't think there were any changes to this section. This is about lot sizes. This is more on the fringes, looking at areas that are more single family, the duplex neighborhoods that are duplexes, and seeing what we can do to some gentle density in those neighborhoods. And then parking requirements as well, as again, it's just the cost of parking, looking at ways we can reduce some of those development costs. Any questions on this page?
Nope.
So again, this is more the gentle density with ADUs. Tracking affordable housing development. And this streamlined one is really more just about some of the practical ways of just showing how the development process works, just to give, not that it actually changes the process, just to make it more clear for developers. Some of this came out of the rezoning as well.
can I, if you go back up, there's under improve administration and implementation of affordable housing. The second one is publish an annual housing report to track city spending on affordable housing development. If you mean housing authority spending, that's something we're more than happy to do. But if you're talking about city spending, then that would you have to add the city to the list of responsible parties, because we don't, we're not the city. We don't know what they always know what they're doing.
Okay.
Does anybody at the city track that currently?
I don't think so. I think we just track our workforce units. I don't think we track. And then I think the redevelopment agency was getting city funds. I don't know if they have in the last couple budget cycles for that. I can't recall.
No, there used to be a line item for affordable housing that was removed.
I thought so.
That was
Yeah.
removed, but I thought was it put back in this year? I need to go back and double check, but I thought that I don't know if it got incorporated into another line, but we can ask Brian.
Yeah, just, recognizing that, the city isn't always contributing to development of these units, and they some units time out, and
Yeah.
Absolutely.
it always seems so much easier than it actually is to know how many affordable units you have in your community at any one time.
This is a
Well,
little off
the other-
topic. Go ahead, Jess.
I was just gonna say, Steve, the other piece of it too is that we have the housing trust, right, that we haven't spent down from yet, and so there's got to be some tie to that as well, some accountability on how we're going to spend that down, and also what the balance is in that account, and how we are going to link that to supporting the development.
While we were talking, I was trying to find I knew we had a couple charts that had the AMI and SMI, just to give you a sense. For AMI, for a family of four, the base is 180,000. And that's 100%, I should say. And then 100% at SMI is only 122. So that's a big spread between the SMI and AMI.
Steve, is it that the state requires us to report out in SMI? Is that what it is?
I think it does in the workforce. I have to double check, but I thought it did.
It's really confusing. I wonder if we should talk to the state about trying to standardize it.
Well, I think the tricky thing is with that is that, if you went off the AMI down here, the numbers are just so big, even like 60%, it's just a really large number.
Yeah, who do we
That's
want to
true.
who do we want to ensure has housing, resource,
Yeah.
like supportive or not supportive, but subsidized, units, because it we start using AMI, it's quite high.
I agree about the numbers most definitely, but it's just interesting because we've been talking for several weeks about this stuff, and I mean, a few of us, me not included, have been working in this area forever, and we still all get AMI. We still get AMI and SMI used all the
Yes.
time. It's really hard to keep track of what those numbers look like from a practitioner standpoint, even.
Yes.
It's probably got something to do with the way the federal government distributes money, and it probably do it based off of the Norwalk, Stanford areas got such a different need in terms of finances and housing than other parts of the state. So the money stretches so much farther in other areas. So it probably has something to do with it.
It's
Yeah,
true. Yeah.
we're very glad they use the Stanford Norwalk metro area for fair market rent, because if they use the state, we'd be in a lot of trouble and no one would be able to use their vouchers.
Can we get an update on the trust that we put together? I don't think I've seen any update on it since we passed the ordinance.
Yeah,
Which
we can dig that out
Over a
pretty
year-
quick.
Yeah, over a year ago.
All right, so then the next section moves into the potential for public-private partnerships, identifying underutilized municipal land, as well as underutilized land that could be owned by a faith-based organization or so we have started doing the land use analysis. We did get some mapping from Michelle and some preliminary data that we worked into a draft land use chapter. So I know that came up as a discussion. I'm just going to switch over to a different sheet for a second here. So this is the preliminary map. I think Michelle's making some tweaks to it, but
We're still on
We're still on
the Word doc.
oh, you can't see it? Okay, sorry.
Not yet.
Let me
Gotta stop sharing. or
stop sharing.
re-share.
Sorry, I thought I was sharing my application, but apparently it was.
Yep.
Okay, see the map now?
Yes,
So this map takes a look at the parcels within the city that are either underdeveloped based on what the zoning allows. So for example, the CD4 and the CD3C, these are parcels where they allow up to 4 stories or up to 3 stories, but the development that's on them right now is less than that. As you could see, it pretty much follows the Route 1 corridor and the Route
All the
7,
big box shops.
like all the big box areas where there's a lot of, 1-story buildings, large parking lots, some office, but, primarily retail corridors. The dark green are the faith-based institutions that have fairly large parcels of land. What we've seen or starting to see nationally is that there's some partnerships between these organizations in building some residential scale, like townhouse, whatever fits within that neighborhood that's surrounding that faith-based institution, affordable housing on their property. Underutilized government land, not much came up for that. Norwalk Community College came up, but I'm not sure I would really say that's underutilized. And then the grays are large parking lots and large lots with like a substantial amount of excess parking. So again, those are primarily falling in the Route 1 and Route 7 corridors. So not a lot of excess land to work with, which was a concern. So I'll go back to let's see. Does everybody see the matrix?
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Do you need to
So
add the
On the map, there were a bunch of small blue areas in South Norwalk. Or is there like a list of what those are, that they're underutilized government land? I mean, is that? Because
I will get a list of those.
That is something that an agency like mine just rules over if there's some actual land that's underutilized to build on. I'm pretty sure we've looked at all of them, but there's certainly a bunch there that I wouldn't mind knowing more about.
Okay, so we'll get a list to go with this map.
Thank you so much.
On the matrix, do you need to add the faith-based for angle? Is that already in there?
Yes, I think we do need to add that in here.
I mean, but what the map is highlighting, going back to Steve and Sonia's conversation earlier, is we're going to provide more housing. There's not a lot of places to go other than up seems to be the most obvious place. So I think we just have to recognize that or keep that in mind.
That is a concern, yes. Nicole, you had a question?
Yeah, I'm just thinking, are we only talking about apartment buildings?
No, we're
Okay.
not.
Okay, okay.
No, I think, affordable housing, it's a part of it's a supply and demand problem, so having more housing at all sizes, and a lot of what we heard through this process was a need for more townhomes, condos, things that are like entry level home ownership units. So not everything is
Right.
not everything's going to be a mixed use development or
Okay. Yeah,
all development.
apartment.
To
Thank you.
play devil's advocate for a second, Ashley, and Steve is gonna punch me in the face and probably Jessica will too, for even saying
No.
this. You can make the argument that every single family home lot is underutilized parcel of land. And the map just changes colors.
Yeah, so one of the
'Cause-
things that we are trying to get at in this section up here about lowering lot sizes, updating ADUs, allowing more duplexes,
Duplexes,
townhouses.
that all fits in
Yeah,
the
it
single
all
family.
fits in
So
there. So, I mean, we'll be circulating the draft chapter shortly to the whole group, but there are examples, really good regional examples of this is a quad. It
Right.
looks like a McMansion, but this is 4 units of housing.
totally, there's great examples. I just know like that's an area we're limiting. I wonder how much are we limiting our potential if we're saying the only places these are gonna land are if like when we define underutilized, just something to think about of like, if you change the color of that map, literally the whole city is underutilized.
So I know it was very contentious going through
Yeah.
the rezoning process, and so maybe that's a longer term item. But there are some more opportunities to adjust that. All right. If we were, sorry, just jumping back. Okay, so we have the competitive RFP. I think we explained that last time. That fits into some of those parcels on the map. This was a concept we discussed last time about, having a local level program to preserve some of these. Maybe these are market rate buildings, but they are at a price point that makes them affordable to that 80% AMI contingent. If there's a way to keep those at that affordability level, but allowing them to be improved, so they're not falling into disrepair. So this could be an option for some of the trust money, using that to have like micro grants. Then also expanding some of the use of the community development block grants and tax credit programs. So these are programs that are already in use, but looking for opportunities for expanding them.
I think that's a similar recommendation we had in the East Norwalk TOD plan about, because South Norwalk has a program, a facade improvement program in place now. We talked about tying that into East Norwalk off of like Osborne and different areas over there.
Okay. Was it implemented?
No, it was a recommendation that we never quite got off the ground, but this
Okay.
might give it further impetus.
Okay. Tax and financing innovations. So I think we went through all of these last time. Don't think we made many updates in this section.
But these are all just effectively saying either try to take advantage of programs that exist or tap into funding programs that exist.
Exactly. So a lot of these
Okay.
already exist. I think one of the things that we can do is make these programs, make the population more aware of these programs.
Mhm.
Having like a help guide where to go, especially for the smaller scale landlords and developers, the ones who may not be as familiar as the larger developers with some of these programs.
And I guess the $1 million question is, does the city want to consider offering additional things in addition to what these already are in place, right? Is that another
Yes.
option
So
here?
yeah. So like one example, this would be a city initiative, would be a community land trust. This is one way where you can develop affordable home ownership units. It
Mhm.
would be controlled by the land, underlying land would be owned by the land trust.
Well, just thinking about like new funding streams that come in, right? Let's hope we don't have another pandemic, right? Where we got like ARPA funding, but maybe even putting in the like a prioritization, right? To affordable housing, because typically there's multiple things, right? You can use funds for, but that would like any new funding stream the city receives that allows for those funds to be used for these purposes, the city would prioritize this type of opportunity, because we don't want to just get locked into the existing funding streams that
Yeah.
exist today. Because some of them may get taken away tomorrow, like
Right.
reformatted as something else. And I think we just always kind of want to have this as a priority, right, for the city.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'm not sure of the methodology that we would utilize, that are any funding that the city receives, that affordable housing is at the forefront of. How can we utilize that funding to support this effort? I mean, we're using ARPA funding has been allocated for the work that we're doing right now, the affordable housing plan, but ARPA dollars are not being utilized for affordable housing beyond the plan. And that might be because of the way ARPA dollars are mandated to be utilized. It may not fall within the guidelines of using ARPA dollars, but any other funding that the city receives, I think we have to come up with a strategy as to how do we keep affordable housing at the forefront of allocating those dollars.
And Greg, it doesn't just have to be the money that the city receives, right? I mean, you have a capital budget and an operating budget, and you could decide that that's something you want to spend some of those routine funding sources on as well.
Right. So yeah, absolutely. It goes beyond what the city receives. It's baking it into the budget.
I think that some ARPA dollars are allowed to be spent towards capital improvements.
Right, and to clarify what I'm saying, I wasn't saying that, like, the ARPA decisions have, I believe, been made, right? But at the time those funds were received, had we had this, like, embedded, like, saying that as funds come in, assessing whether or not they can be used at affordable housing, and that the city would prioritize affordable housing or upward economic, workforce development, however, and and I think in a lot of ways you did do that, but we never know the future of the city, and wanting to make sure that that's always part of the city's initiative.
Okay. So I think I get the point that you're going for, and so adding a strategy about identifying potential, maybe have like a shovel ready project list or something to that effect. Programs
Yeah,
that,
and as funding comes in, or as dollars are being decided, that this is a factor in which those opportunities are being reviewed through, right? Like
Okay.
a lens that they're being reviewed through.
yeah, so we can add a strategy to that effect.
Would
Yeah,
any of
and
the,
I would go as far as saying add a strategy prioritizing new or existing funding streams. Not to, say that we only have to look at what comes in new, but let's look at what we currently have, and how can we allocate it towards affordable housing.
Okay.
did any of the ideas that Chuck threw out around tax changes, did those pencil out at all?
I haven't done the math on them.
Okay, so I don't know, Steve, if there's an appetite for that in the city or not. There may not be.
I think it would depend on what the impacts are before that we could make any decision.
I'm so sorry. I apologize. I have to jump off the call. But look forward to our next meeting, and please let me know if there's anything I can help with on the backside.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ashley, there was an item above that just said that the housing authority would educate the community on the availability of state and local resources. It's on the bottom of the screen. You just passed it.
Oh, sorry.
What is the? I guess what are we signing ourselves up for there? What are you talking about?
So the idea here would be to have a like a handout for, or on your website, a page that could point to some of the to the state and local in terms of the voucher program, in terms of the availability of, I think some of this is already done, like some, the availability of low income housing, or the set aside units within the existing developments. But then also, so maybe it's not just the Norwalk Housing Authority, but also for the smaller scale developers, which maybe this is more the Norwalk Redevelopment Agency, identifying the resources, the grants, the funding streams for the actual construction of new housing.
Yeah, because we issue bonds, but I don't know that we'd want to take on educating other developers on like low income housing tax credits. It's very complex stuff that, referring them to agencies is one thing, but educating just,
Okay.
I guess that somehow that made me a little nervous if then they're gonna be like, hey, what did you guys do with that? And
Can we say notify or refer?
refer sounds good, sure.
Does that work?
That's great, thank you.
Okay, and then the last section, federal and state advocacy. I think we covered this quite a bit last time. The idea here is that there are a lot of programs that are available. There could be more, and there could be some adjustments to these programs. Making sure that they continue to be funded, that as these programs are being developed, especially the home ownership ones, that they're being expanded to include, as we talked about earlier, Norwalk is within an area that has a higher AMI than the rest of the state. So making sure that the caps that are set on some of these programs don't aren't too low that Norwalk wouldn't be eligible. As well as some local tax credits as an option. And then also working with our regional planning agency, WestCog, supporting some of their goals to facilitate more affordable housing among your neighbors.
So I gotta just want a clarification here.
Sure.
Because it talks about, because I agree 100% that sort of pushing through WestCog for our neighboring towns to do more is of course important. But then it also says to create an affordable resource center, an affordable trust fund, and a community land trust. That's for WestCog to do those things, right?
That's for WestCog to do those things. So this is advocating, or they're the representatives within the city of Norwalk to push WestCog to implement their recommendations. So they would be doing these things.
Okay. I guess as much as I really want our neighbors to take more of to do more, at the same time, I want to make sure we're not taking any Norwalk resources to do that. You know what I mean? Because we have rather limited resources to build for our own families. And so I want them to do it with their own money, as I guess is in their own land is all I'm saying.
Okay. So do you think we should be any text edits here to clarify that point?
No, I think it's fine.
Okay. All right. So I think that's it for the matrix. In terms of where we are in the process, the action plan is going to have 5 sections. So the introduction is just the introduction. Basically, we'll go over the process, how we got here, how we arrived at these recommendations, the meetings that were held, the stakeholder interviews. There will be a section on the history of affordable housing in Norwalk that's drawing from the Planning, Conservation and Development and just regional history of how we arrived at these land use patterns. Chapter 3 is the housing needs assessment. So you've all seen the full version of the housing needs assessment. We'll have a summary of it within the document itself, and then the full housing needs assessment will be in the appendix. Chapter 4 is the land use and zoning analysis. So you saw a little bit of that flash on the screen today. We'll be sending that draft chapter out shortly. And then the last section is the vision, goals, and actions, which is where this matrix will fall. And also go through all the visions and various goals, gives a little bit more explanation for those items. The goal is to have the document finalized so that it can be referred to the Common Council for their public hearing. And I believe the next meeting with this group is on September 23rd. So we'd like to have the full document to you in advance of that meeting.
So the goal is
what-
September 23rd, us, and then Common Council after that.
Common Council after that, correct?
What is the date for the Common Council meeting?
I'm not sure what the date of the Common Council meeting is.
Well,
Steve,
has
was
one
there-
been set or has one been set or just aspirational goal sometime in
Yeah,
October?
I think that's sometime in October.
Oh, okay. All right. No problem.
I know at one point there was talk about a deadline of when the plan needed to be adopted by. Was that a hard deadline or a goal? Just to make sure we're meeting those dates.
I think calendar wise, we're okay. So I think, you
Okay.
know, the draft of the entire document comes out and then this group provides input on that. And then maybe there's any changes that come out of that. And then that's when it goes to council and planning and zoning for their thoughts and, you know, public input again as well. And then whatever changes come out, then, you know, we probably amend the citywide plan to include this and then work on specific, and whether it's a zoning amendment or other policies would kind of spur off from there. I just think one thing with some of these recommendations, I think I want to make sure if we have a recommendation that says increase the workforce housing requirement to 15%, that we understand what those impacts are. I don't want to just, because we did that with because I think I sent you a report from a few years ago we did some rezoning in South Norwalk, and the goal, it was suggested at that time to go to 10 to 20%. And there was a lot of pushback, and there was an economic analysis done, and it showed that 20% was going to be problematic. So I think we need to understand what will happen if we make specific changes, whether it's on the tax side or on the inclusionary zoning side.
Okay. Yeah, we can do that backup analysis.
I guess the overarching question I have is that will the actions that we document in this plan create the inventory to satisfy our affordable housing, workforce housing needs as outlined by the data research that has been done?
I would be shocked if we're going to meet the needs of the community through just these. I don't know there's a plan in any town, city, or, you know, anywhere that would be able to meet the needs of our community. I think there's an economic element to it that's not just related to housing. And as long as the minimum wage doesn't support the cost of of apartments. You know, there's no way we're gonna build or amend our code enough to make enough units for everyone who needs them. I think there's too many other elements unrelated to housing that impact the housing market.
Well, that's a really interesting point, Adam. Is there something like along those lines that we could say out, maybe it's just at a higher level that talk about the other impacts affecting? So, I mean, what I've kind of thought all along is that, you know, like zoning's not going to be the answer to all these issues. So I think if there's other things that we could at least say, hey, there's these other external factors that are driving this, that there are other policy changes need to be made, whether it's increasing minimum wage or whatever, that those get. And it might not be part of this study beyond that, or it might be somebody else's ball to pick up at that point, but maybe we could think about if there's what those are.
Yeah, because what is it, Adam? Like it's like $26 or $32 or something minimum wage would need to be to rent the average 1 bedroom or something like that.
Yeah, if
Is it
you look at
more
the
than
National Low Income Housing Coalition, which compares the fair market rent, which is the 2-bed market rent for the 40th percentile of the market, lower 40th percentile with minimum wage. I think the last report that just came out, they do it every year, said that you need 3 full-time minimum wage jobs, something like 85,000 or something like that a year. I forget what the number is that you'd have to earn. So it's like, yeah, it's almost 3 times the current minimum wage.
But in Connecticut, that'd be 45. And Greg, I think a lot of it comes down to political will, right? Like,
Right.
how far do you want to push the zoning and dealing with people saying, I don't want more density? Like, we can't get more housing until we get more density. Like,
Exactly.
it's really it. So I think a lot of these things are aspirational, but like, if even just to pencil out, like, could anyone who worked in the city find a workforce housing unit? So what is that? 20,000 people work for the city? I may be off there. So that's like 20,000 more units. That's 20.
That want, well, let's just say that want to live in the city.
Right,
So
right.
they-
That's I think the number of units that the whole Merit project that BLT has proposed, the master plan for 6 buildings is, I think, 1,500 units. So you would need 20 of those projects just to meet the need of every worker in Norwalk to live in the city.
And where
Like-
would you even put them all?
Right. I mean, put that aside for a second. I'm just saying that's the scale that we're talking
Right, no,
about.
I understand.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. I mean, you could think of reimagining the post road a little bit, when those big boxes and reconvert, but like, you know, they're owned by other people. It's not like you can't. So I think there's a lot of creativity still to come, Greg. And I think a lot of it comes down to like people saying they want everything, but then they don't want to deal with what that actually means. And I think it's partly city leaders helping people see that, you know, to get to one, we have to get to the other, and being okay with that. And it's sort of like a messaging campaign that comes with that.
But
So when we, so
I don't
when we
wanna
look
lose
at,
sight of
so,
the-
so when we look at item 5, when we have vision, goal, and actions, you know, maybe we need another section called expectations. You know, I don't think we want people to walk away from this, looking at this plan with the expectation that this is the answer to all of our needs, because it isn't. You know, so how far does this plan take us, and what more do we need to address? Nick mentioned political will. Adam mentioned, you know, economic impact. You know, what other variables need to be addressed in order for us to even move the barometer just a little bit as it relates to affordable housing? This plan is not going to get us to the end of the game. So I'm just raising that, not that to answer now, but something that we should consider, setting the right expectation of what this document means for the city of Norwalk.
Or maybe even going in the introduction too. I don't know.
Right, it could go in.
I don't want to say though, I want to be clear. I'm not saying that this isn't a valuable exercise, that this won't make a difference. This is good, positive stuff we're doing here. But to answer the question, does this solve our problem? Yeah, we're not even close.
I agree with the suggestion to bring this up in the introduction.
Or maybe it's an exec summary or something like that at the
Yeah.
beginning.
Because you can imagine, Greg, a solution here. It's just how much it's going to take. to
Right, how
do.
much do we want to, how much do we want to spend?
Like it's
And-
a cost, and it's also a political will aspect, right? You know,
I mean, that's why some of the goals are focused around lobbying, because it,
right. I think that's a really
it's-
important piece of this is the lobbying aspect of it, and also that we added the other communities in the intro because it's sort of like it's not just a Norwalk problem. You know, we can only control so much.
Right. So we will make these changes to the matrix as well as finalize the other chapters. So that this committee will get a copy of everything in advance of the next meeting. And at the next meeting, we'll discuss any additional revisions and see what needs to happen before this can get referred to the Common Council and the Planning and Zoning Commission.
Great. Thanks
you
for
so
your
much.
time, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.